Welcome back to the Business Intelligence Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan McDaniel. Today's episode is powered by Quantico AI. Today, I want to talk to you about something that I think is becoming one of the most important forces in modern business. And strangely enough, it's still underrated. Not intelligence by itself, not capital by itself, not even talent by itself. Today, we're talking about speed. Not reckless speed, not sloppy speed, no fake hustle. I mean real operational speed. The kind of speed that lets a company learn faster, respond faster, follow up faster, adapt faster, and execute faster than the people around them. Because I think we're moving into a business environment where slow is getting more expensive by the quarter. And a lot of people still don't fully realize that. For a long time, companies could get away with being slow. A slow follow-up, a slow internal process, a slow approved chain, a slow response to market shifts, a slow handoff between teams. And yes, all of that was inefficient, but it was survivable. Now, I'm not so sure. Because technology, and especially AI, is beginning to compress time in a way that changes the math. And once time gets compressed, expectations change. What used to feel acceptable suddenly feels broken. What used to feel normal suddenly feels clunky. And what used to feel good enough starts quietly losing to something faster. That's the shift I want to talk to you about today. Because when I look across industries right now, I keep seeing the same pattern. AI is not just making certain tasks cheaper, it's making certain workflows dramatically faster. And once something becomes dramatically faster, it doesn't stay a nice little bonus for long. It becomes the new baseline. That is where things get very interesting. One of the reasons this topic has been on my mind so much lately is because I've seen this up close. I've worked in high trust, relationship driven environments for years. Mortgage, business development, outreach, events, follow up, partner relationships, staying top of mind, trying to create momentum where there wasn't any. And if you've ever worked in that kind of environment, you know the game. Speed matters. Not in a flashy way, in a quiet way. You call back first. You follow up first. You get the answer first. You stay present first. You keep the opportunity alive while someone else is still getting organized. A lot of business is won in those invisible windows. Not with genius, not with theatrics, just with timing. And I think AI is beginning to widen those windows for the people using it well. That's part of why I keep coming back to this idea that speed is no longer just an operational metric. It's becoming a strategic advantage. And I don't mean that as some broad motivational phrase. I mean it literally. The organization that learns faster has an advantage. The organization that communicates faster has an advantage. The organization that closes loops faster has an advantage. The organization that turns information into action faster has an advantage. That is not theory anymore. You can see it showing up in places much bigger than sales and marketing. For example, Reuters reported in January that major drug makers are now using AI to speed up clinical trial operations and regulatory submissions. In that report, Reuters said AI is already helping with participant recruitment, site selection, and the drafting of regulator-ready documents, shaving weeks off in labor-intensive processes. Novartis said AI compressed a typical 4 to 6 week site selection process into a 2-hour meeting for a late-stage cardiovascular trial, and GSK said digital tools and AI tools helped it reduce manual work and speed trials enough to save about £8 million in a late-stage asthma study. Think about that for a second. That is not some guy on LinkedIn talking about prompt hacks. That is the pharmaceutical industry, one of the most heavily regulated and documentation-heavy environments in the world, saying, we can move faster now. Not recklessly, not by cutting corners, by stripping friction out of tedious, time-consuming processes. And that matters because once highly regulated industries start using AI for speed, you can stop pretending this is only about novelty. It means the real value is getting clearer. AI is becoming a time compression layer. That phrase has been stuck in my head. A time compression layer. It doesn't magically make every business smarter overnight, but it can reduce the drag between intention and action. And in business, drag is expensive. Every extra day in a decision cycle, every lead that waits, every internal bottleneck, every report that takes too long, every handoff that lags, every missed follow-up, all of that compounds. And once a company starts compressing those delays, even modestly, the cumulative effect can get serious. I saw another example of this in a completely different world. Argonne National Laboratory published a February piece on AI tools speeding up nuclear fuel research, and the core idea was simple but powerful. By accelerating the research process, these tools could reduce the time and cost required to qualify metallic fuels. Again, look at the pattern. Different field, different stakes, different technical environment, same story. Speed is becoming more valuable. And not just speed in the sense of do more work faster, speed in the sense of shortening the path between discovery and deployment, shortening the path between data and decision, shortening the path between complexity and clarity. That's the part I think many people are underestimating right now. Because most people still talk about AI as if the main question is, can it do the work? That's not the only question anymore. A very important question now is how much faster can this system help us move without degrading quality? And on that front, the evidence keeps getting harder to ignore. MIT researchers Shaked Noy and Whitney Zhang ran a pre-registered study with 444 college-educated professionals doing mid-level professional writing tasks. Their working paper found that access to ChatGPT substantially increased productivity, reducing time taken while improving output quality. MIT News summarized the findings more plainly. Time to complete the tasks fell by 40%, and output quality rose by 18%. Now, I want to be responsible here and not overstate that study. It was focused on a particular category of knowledge work. It was a 2023 working paper, not the final answer to every labor question on Earth. And not every task benefits the same way. But still, a 40% reduction in time with an 18% lift in quality is not a cute little efficiency gain. That's a meaningful shift in economic reality for the kinds of tasks many businesses do constantly. And when enough of those tasks speed up across an organization, something deeper happens. The company starts feeling different. The pace changes. The expectation changes. The output changes. The number of shots on goal increases. You get more attempts, more iterations, more touches, more tests, more follow-up, more clarity, more throughput. And that is why I think speed is becoming a moat. Not the only moat, but a real one, because speed compounds. A company that responds twice as fast does not just respond twice as fast. It often learns faster, corrects faster, and compounds trust faster. A company that can test 5 ideas while another company tests 2 has an informational advantage. A company that can rearrange leads immediately while another waits until tomorrow has a conversion advantage. A company that can draft, review, and refine faster has an execution advantage. And the really important part is that these advantages often start out almost invisible. That's why this shift is so easy to miss. Companies do not usually post, "Good morning, everyone. We've quietly removed 6 layers of friction from our workflows and are now gaining ground." They just start performing better. They start showing up sooner. They start cleaning up handoffs. They start following up relentlessly. They start learning from data faster. They start making slower competitors feel weirdly outdated. And a lot of the slower competitors still think the gap is about branding or market conditions or some mysterious edge. Sometimes that edge is just operational tempo. And that's one of the reasons I think the phrase speed to lead was always pointing at something bigger than sales. And this is where speed becomes incredibly practical, because there's actually been research on this. There's a well-known study, often referenced through MIT Sloan and Inside Sales, that found something pretty remarkable. Companies that respond to a lead within 5 minutes are 21 times more likely to qualify that lead compared to those that wait 30 minutes. Think about that. 21 times. Not 21%, 21 times. And what's even more interesting is what happens after that. After 5 minutes, contact rates start dropping dramatically. After 30 minutes, they drop even further. After an hour, you're often competing with someone else who already got there first. And if you think about that in a real-world context, it makes perfect sense. If someone fills out a form, if someone requests information, if someone raises their hand, that moment is when their attention is the highest. That's when they're thinking about it. That's when they're ready to talk. But traditional workflows often introduce delay. Maybe someone sees it later. Maybe it gets routed. Maybe someone's in a meeting. Maybe someone plans to call tomorrow. And in those small delays, opportunities quietly disappear. That's why I think this idea of speed being an advantage is no longer theoretical, because we now have real world data showing that responsiveness directly impacts outcomes. And if AI helps compress response time from hours to minutes to seconds, you're not just getting more efficient, you're changing the probability of success. And when you change probability, you change outcomes. Yes, it matters when a lead comes in. Yes, the first call matters. Yes, responsiveness matters on the front end. But the deeper lesson is that speed itself changes outcomes. The faster organization gets more at-bats, and more at-bats matter. This is also where I want to make an important distinction. I'm not arguing that every company should suddenly become frantic. That would be a disaster. Frantic is not the same as fast. Chaos is not the same as speed. Sloppiness is not the same as tempo. In fact, the best kind of business speed often looks calm. The best operators I've seen are not panicking. They're not performatively busy. They're not running around making noise. They are not just sitting in unnecessary delay. That is a very different thing. They have fewer dead spots, fewer idle gaps, fewer waiting periods that add no value, fewer moments where work just sits there because nobody built a better way. That is what I think AI is starting to expose. It's exposing how much of traditional business timing was never sacred to begin with. It was just tolerated. There's a huge difference between a process being necessary and a process being merely inherited. A lot of companies are running inherited delay, inherited slowness, inherited administrative drag, inherited communication lag, inherited approval structures that made sense 10 years ago and now just burn time. And when a system enters the picture, it reveals how much of that drag was optional. That can be uncomfortable, by the way, but once you see it, you really can't unsee it. Once you realize a workflow can happen in seconds instead of hours, or hours instead of days, your tolerance changes. You stop admiring complexity for its own sake, and you start asking sharper questions. Why does this take so long? Why are we waiting on this? Why are these people doing manual work a machine could tee up for them? Why does the handoff break here every single time? Why are we losing momentum in the middle of the process? Those are healthy questions, and the companies asking them now are going to look very smart in hindsight. There's also something cultural happening here that I think deserves attention. Speed is becoming a signal, not just a metric, a signal. It signals clarity, it signals alignment, it signals operational maturity, it signals that a company can turn intention into action. And in the years ahead, I think customers, partners, and employees are all going to become more sensitive to that signal. When a company responds immediately, people notice. When a process feels smooth, people notice. When communication is clear and fast, people notice. And when a company feels slow, bloated, and strangely behind the moment, people notice that too. Maybe not always consciously, but they feel it. And that feeling matters. Because people increasingly compare your speed not just against your direct competitors, but against the fastest systems they interact with anywhere. And that is the brutal part. Your customers not only comparing you to your industry, they're comparing you to the best experience they had this week. And that is a much tougher standard. Which is why I think a lot of companies are going to wake up over the next few years and realize they didn't have a marketing problem first, they had a speed problem. Not enough learning speed, not enough response speed, not enough execution speed, not enough follow-through speed. And speed problems eventually become revenue problems. Now, I also want to say this clearly. I do not think speed alone wins. A fast, bad company is still bad. A fast, dishonest company is still dishonest. A fast, incompetent company just creates damage at scale. So no, speed is not everything. But if you pair speed with sound judgment, good ethics, clear positioning, and real human intelligence, now you have something dangerous in the best sense. Now you have leverage. And that's where I think the best operators are headed. Not towards replacing human judgment, but towards amplifying it. Towards using systems that help them move with more consistency, more precision, and less lag. That's also why I don't think this becomes a story of humans versus machines. I really don't. I think the more useful frame is humans with better system versus humans stuck in older ones. That frame makes far more sense to me, because in the examples I mentioned, the value is not magic. Reuters was not describing AI suddenly discovering every new drug molecule overnight. It described the technology streamlining the messy middle around trials, recruitment, documentation, and submissions. That is process acceleration. Argonne was not saying AI makes nuclear science trivial. It was saying AI tools can help speed parts of a hard research process and potentially reduce the time and cost required for fuel qualification. That is accelerated research infrastructure. The MIT researchers were not claiming AI solves every category of work. They showed strong gains on specific professional writing tasks. That is targeted productivity acceleration. And that's the mature way to think about this. Not fantasy, not denial. Compression, acceleration, tempo. And if that is the real story, then I think a lot of business leaders need to start asking a better question. Not, is AI overhyped? That question's too blunt now. A better question is, where specifically is slowness costing us more than we realize? Because that's where the opportunity is hiding. Maybe it's in lead response. Maybe it's onboarding. Maybe it's reporting. Maybe it's scheduling. Maybe it's documentation. Maybe it's customer service. Maybe it's internal communication. Maybe it's follow up. Maybe it's all the little tasks your best people still waste energy on. Somebody is going to remove that friction. The only question is whether it will be you or someone faster. And I think that's where the market is headed. Toward firms that are not merely bigger, not merely louder, not merely more polished, but more responsive, more adaptive, more operationally fluid, and more able to turn information into movement. Because in business now, slow is expensive. It's expensive in the missed opportunities. It's expensive in wasted labor. It's expensive in delayed learning. It's expensive in customer perception. It's expensive in momentum. And once a faster competitor enters your category, it gets even more expensive. So that's the thought I want to leave you with today. In the old world, speed was nice to have. In this world, speed is becoming structural. And the companies that understand that first are going to build an advantage that looks obvious in retrospect and invisible in real time. And that's usually how these shifts work. They seem gradual, then suddenly they seem inevitable. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Business Intelligence Podcast. I've been your host, Ryan McDaniel. Today's episode has been sponsored by Quantico AI. To learn more about Quantico or to schedule a call with me to discuss anything relating to AI, please take a look at the links in the description. I'm always down for a great conversation. And finally, I want to reassure you of one thing. If you're hearing my voice, you're not late. You're early. We're going to figure this out together. I'll see you soon.